From the world of politics to the world of business, this is Balance of Power. Live from Washington, D.C.
From Bloomberg's worldwide headquarters in New York to our TV and radio audiences globally, welcome to Balance of Power. Alongside Joe Matthew, I'm Kaylee Lyons.
Tonight, a presidential victory lap. President Trump just moments away from taking the stage at a U.S. steel plant just outside of Pittsburgh, where he's expected to hold a rally and celebrate his administration's decision to clear the contentious takeover of the company by Japan's Nippon Steel. We'll bring you those remarks and analysis with our reporters as both investors and union members listen for answers on the shape of that deal.
Plus, after a series of legal setbacks on everything from tariffs to Harvard student visa program, the Supreme Court grants the president a win this morning, allowing the administration to revoke the protected legal status of some 500,000 migrants for now. What the decision means for the president's deportation promise.
We'll also examine developing news today as we report on the Trump administration's plan to broaden restrictions on China's tech sector with new regulations, what's now being targeted and why, and the long goodbye.
Elon's delivered a colossal change in the old ways of doing business in Washington. Americans owe him a great debt of gratitude. So I just want to thank Elon for his time as a special government employee.
After only 4 months at the Department of Government Efficiency, the Oval Office farewell for Elon Musk, and the work DOGE is expected to continue without him. But we begin tonight right outside Pittsburgh, where the president is set to deliver remarks on U.S. Steel at a U.S. Steel facility this hour. And joining us now live from the ground in West Mifflin, Pennsylvania, is Bloomberg's Josh Wingrove. So, Josh, are we expecting this to be an actual outlining of what this deal or partnership, whatever you want to call it, looks like, or is this just a rally for the president?
I wouldn't hold my breath on the first option, but I suppose anything is possible. I think we will be looking within the rally for signals of details on this, but the last we've heard is that they're still ironing things out. So I do feel the need to mention that. You know, the companies, neither company nor the White House have said this is done, it's locked, whatever. What they're saying is it's, you know, a congressman telling us, for instance, as good as done. That is sort of the mood that we're hearing. So we hear that from the president. Now, that being said, if you look behind me, the rally is treating it like a pretty done deal. And so I think the risk factor here appears to be low. Trump has already ripped the Band-Aid off, done his switch of position. Remember, of course, he campaigned against this repeatedly during the 2024 election campaign. And so right now we'll look for details. How quickly can it close? You know, does he really emphatically say yes 100% that we are clearing this? And he's going to talk about American control. I think what's important to note in that is we don't really know what that means, but there's been reporting from us as well as public statements from David McCormick, a Pennsylvania senator, that what they mean by American control includes simply control by Americans, including American nationals on the board, an American CEO, for instance, according to McCormick, and some question of U.S. government input on a certain number of board seats. McCormick called that a golden share. We don't know if that would actually be an equity golden share or not, or just sort of a beefed up CFIUS-type mitigation agreement. So a lot of moving parts, a lot of it in the weeds. I don't expect him to spend a lot of time in the weeds, but I also have learned that with Trump, you never know.
You never know, Josh. That goes for the people who are with you in the room. If our radio listeners could see you, it's teeming with steelworkers, many of whom oppose the idea of an all-Nippon takeover of U.S. Steel. How does President Trump convince them that this is something other than that?
I think he's going to find a receptive ear in this room. There was a bit of a divide between rank and file here, some of whom spoke out publicly in favor of the deal, and union leadership not here, who have been sort of emphatically against it and really pressured President Joe Biden and his administration to oppose it. So I don't think he's going to hear boos or anything here from the members. I think the steelworker members who are here want this deal. We talked to one of them who said that they think that this deal and the investment it will bring and the renewal of these plants will guarantee new jobs in the medium and long term, whereas the union executive had been pushing for more specific job guarantees and maybe even discussion around the existing contracts. So kind of different perspectives both around that jobs question. But really the number of people that have really opposed this deal included some big names, kind of a small list publicly, but big names, including both the president and the guy running against him for president, and then Kamala Harris as well when she was running. And then now it's a smaller list of people who are opposed to this. Governor Shapiro, for instance, isn't, lighting his hair on fire over Trump's shift in position. And so right now there seems to be more political support for this to go forward, and that's where we're at right now.
Bloomberg's Josh Wingrove with great perspective just outside of Pittsburgh, where the president will be speaking. We'll come back to you a little later on this hour, Josh. Before departing for Pennsylvania, the president held an Oval Office send-off for none other than Elon Musk, who is officially departing from his special government employee role today. But Musk shared what he hopes is next for his involvement with this administration.
Well, I expect to continue to provide advice whenever the president would like advice.
I hope so.
I expect to remain a friend and an advisor, and certainly if there's anything the president wants me to do, I'm at the president's service.
Let's get into this now with Bloomberg's Wendy Benjaminson, who joins us from our Washington bureau. Wendy, it's great to see you. Was this farewell? Doesn't Donald Trump need Elon Musk to continue funneling money and energy into the Republican Party?
He certainly does need him for that. And I think that was largely the backdrop of the event you saw today, because they have been starting to get on each other's nerves a little bit. Elon Musk has criticized Trump's one big, beautiful bill, as he calls it. He has made other remarks that aren't quite in line with the presidency. But of course, Elon Musk also has to get back to the businesses that made him the richest man on earth. And, those aren't going well, in part because consumers are turned off by his political activity. So what you saw in the White House today was humble Elon Musk, was I'm here to serve at the pleasure of the president. Everything will be fine. But if you notice, Trump was reading a script from a binder on his desk when he was lauding Elon Musk. So, he's famous for, and we'll see at this rally where Josh is now, how he can wing it when he wants to. But for this, he needed to read a script. So there may be a little bit of, I'll scratch your back and you scratch mine, and we'll just be nice and part ways here.
Well, as we're wondering what President Trump is going to talk about when he takes the stage in Pennsylvania, Wendy, I also wonder if China is going to work its way into his remarks. After today, he contested first on Truth Social, but then when speaking in the Oval Office, that China has violated the agreement that was struck on trade in Geneva, but not really giving us a firmer sense of what exactly those violations are.
Right. So there's been some reporting, Kayleigh, since he put that out, that when Bessent, as Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and other U.S. officials met with Chinese officials in Geneva a couple of weeks ago, that the Chinese agreed to resume their exports of rare earth metals that are used in high-tech production. And in return, the U.S. would allow chips and other high-tech equipment to go from the U.S. to China. Well, apparently neither side has really done that, particularly China, who was really slow-walking releasing the exports of these rare earth minerals. So that is what irritated the president today. The Chinese officials have countered with, but you're not sending us the chips we need to build these jets, that build other high-tech equipment. And so that pause in the incredibly steep tariffs, the 145%, 125% tariffs, the 90-day pause on that is what's on the rocks right now. If they can't agree to start doing the things they promised to do in Geneva, then we'll have to see if this trade deal falls apart.
All right, Bloomberg's Wendy Benjaminson in Washington for us tonight. Thank you so much. Coming up, the Supreme Court allows the Trump administration to immediately end temporary legal status for as many as 500,000 migrants. We'll discuss the details with Nick Akerman, former assistant U.S. attorney. And
with Elon Musk wrapping his time as a special government employee, we remember the ways with President Trump.
And Elon, because he's not very busy, has agreed to head that task force. Be interesting. If he has the time, that'd be a good one to do it.
He likes this place. I can't get him out of here. He just likes this place.
President Trump has ceded the presidency to Elon Musk. No, that's not happening. But Elon's done an amazing job.
Elon can't do and won't do anything without our
approval, and we'll give him the approval where appropriate. If there's a conflict, that we won't let him get near it. But he does have a good natural instinct.
We'll discuss his departure with our political panel coming up on Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio.
It's very important on immigration that we be able to get people out without having to go through a long court case. But we have judges that don't want that to happen. And it's a terrible thing. We have to get them out rapidly, and we know who they are. We know who they are, and we're very careful about who they are, but we have to get them out rapidly, or again, we're not going to have a country.
President Trump in the Oval Office today responding to a Supreme Court ruling that allows the administration to immediately end temporary legal status for up to 500,000 migrants from Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuela, clearing the way for possible deportations and overturning a federal trial court order that had blocked the cancellation of the parole programs while litigation went forward. Joining us now for more here on Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio is Nick Akerman, former assistant U.S. attorney and former Watergate prosecutor. He's here with us live from Global Headquarters in New York. It's good to see you, Nick. Thank you.
Great to be here.
For being here. This is just one instance of the court actually ruling in the president's favor on being able to deport people swiftly or end their legal status. We also saw this with hundreds of thousands of Venezuelan migrants. What does this signal to you? Does it actually tell us anything about the likelihood this becomes permanent rather than lower courts potentially deciding this can't go forward?
Well, I think that's right. I mean, look, what we're watching here is something that actually is in the president's power. Unlike a lot of the other things that he's done, this is certainly something that Joe Biden had set up before. The problem with it is it's just mean and nasty. What they're doing is they're taking people that actually have real problems back home, or whatever country they came from. They're concerned about their lives. They came here because the countries are run by dictators, hoodlums, and hoods, and their lives are in danger. And so he's just looking for big numbers to send people back. He doesn't care who he sends back as long as he's got big numbers. And I think the Supreme Court recognized that this is within his power because it was set up by a president. So there's really not a lot they can do about it. You had a dissent by two of the justices today, Jackson and Sotomayor. And I think, you know, what it really comes down to is he's just being rotten and nasty.
I mean, we're assuming that they're going to be sent back to the countries they fled. To your point, with oppressive regimes, they could end up somewhere else based on what we've seen with this administration.
That's right.
Setting up a whole other court case that we'll talk to Nick Akerman about. But we knew already that this White House was looking to increase the monthly quota of deportations. Does this help them fulfill it?
Well, sure. You got 300,000 right out of the bat, right? I mean, he's been trying to do these onesies, twosies all over the place.
So this is your mass deportation, Nick.
That's right. This is the mass deportation. People who came here, they were invited here, they were vetted out before they even got here. They have jobs, they're parts of communities across the country. These are the people, he said, were eating the dogs and cats in Springfield, Ohio.
Wow.
I mean, it's just outrageous. I mean, it's not who we are. That's the problem. We're the United States of America, and this makes us look really mean and nasty.
Well, and regardless of the kind of spirit or how you want to characterize this, you are saying that he does have legal justification for taking this action. There's been question about his justifications legally for doing the same without due process for other individuals. Cases it feels like we have lost track of as they've kind of slow-rolled through the lower courts, be it the Abrego Garcia case or others when we're considering the Judge Boasberg cases that he was overseeing. What are we looking for next in those cases around this entire question of due process? Because the Supreme Court has said due process is warranted in some
That's
cases.
right. I mean, there's at least 3 people who've been sent over there that everybody acknowledges were not part of any gang, Venezuelan or otherwise, or had committed any kind of criminal activity. And Trump has even acknowledged that he could bring the person back, even though the Garcia case, he could bring Garcia back, even though he acknowledges, he could make a phone call to the president of El Salvador, and Trump would be back in a nanosecond. I mean, Garcia would be back in a nanosecond. So again, they're just trying to keep the numbers up. They're trying to be as mean and nasty as possible. They think in some way this is going to dissuade others from coming to this country. The problem is it not only dissuades immigrants from coming to this country, it dissuades people who are tourists, it dissuades students, it dissuades all kinds of people that are major portions of our economy. I mean, it's destroying all other aspects of American life. And what he's trying to do is just rack up numbers and trying to get publicity.
To your point, though, as our legal analyst in this conversation, he is doing nothing illegal here, correct?
Well, he is.
Kayleigh asked a question about due process. Will this group of 500,000 people get an interview before they leave?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. I mean, this is part of the power of the president. Joe Biden was able to use his power to bring all those people in. And the same way, he could have used his power to kick all these people out. So this is not like a number of other cases that are out there where the president has basically taken over powers of Congress, taken over situations where Congress has legislated money for specific programs that he's cut out, which he cannot do. Those are the kind of cases that are going to get up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court is going to rule that he has no power to do that, including on the tariffs. I mean, that's the other big issue that came out this week. Yeah,
well, Nick, you read my mind because we want to talk about that. We did hear from President Trump responding to the legal back and forth on his tariff agenda. This is what he said in the Oval Office this afternoon.
If we didn't have that power of tariffs, we would economically be destroyed as a country because they will destroy us. Other countries will destroy us with unchecked tariffs. We can check them when we have the use. They tried to take that power away from us. And if you take that power away, we're not going to have a country. We won't have an economically viable country.
Of course, the tariffs are still in place thanks to an appeals court while the appellate process plays out. But this all comes down to what he can actually justify using IEEPA for.
That's right.
Do you see it as justified in the way in which this administration has tried?
Absolutely not. I mean, actually have 4 judges in the last couple of days that ruled that he can't do it. You had the International Court of Trade that said that these were illegal. They looked at it from one aspect. You had a district court judge in D.C. who said that that tariffs weren't even included in IEEPA, that they have nothing to do with tariffs. The International Court of Trade said that this is not, even though they didn't address whether tariffs could actually be brought, he said the tariffs here were way out of whack with what they could do, what the president can do. That the emergency that he's claiming, which is the fentanyl importation into the U.S., have absolutely nothing to do with the tariffs. I mean, even the idea that all of these countries he's put tariffs on, he is not negotiating with them about fentanyl. That's got nothing to do with it. He's negotiating about numbers. And that statute does not permit him to do it. If you look at that, there's nothing in there about tariffs, nothing about the president having that power. In fact, no other president since 1977, when this was first enacted, has ever used that statute for tariffs.
Yeah, how about that? So we're in a world now, and I wonder what the former Watergate prosecutor inside of you thinks when you hear about not only impeaching judges, but this daily reference to unelected judges. What is the White House trying to do?
Oh, they're trying to basically make the judiciary look small. They're trying to make it look as though they're taking over from the president. The fact of the matter is the judiciary is the only check that we've got right now on President Trump. I mean, they're the only ones that are actually standing up and doing something.
It is the foil to this administration.
Right. And so what he's trying to do is make it appear to the public that these judges are acting out of school, that they're not doing what they're supposed to do, when in fact they're doing precisely what they're supposed to do. And I think part of the reason why the Supreme Court didn't go along with Justice Jackson and Sotomayor today is because they know they're going to have some cases where they're going to have to rein this guy in, and they're going to have to tell him he doesn't have the power to institute these tariffs. He doesn't have the power to take money that's been appropriated by Congress and stop it from going to various places. And he's got no power to try and take over Harvard University. I mean, that's the other thing that he's doing. I mean, what president of the United States has ever written a letter to a university and said that we want to monitor who you're accepting, who you're hiring for teachers and what courses you're taking. And oh, by the way, we also want to put a monitor in there who will actually check on all of this stuff. I mean, it is so outrageous that the judge had no qualms yesterday. 20 minutes, the whole hearing was 20 minutes, and she entered a preliminary injunction. And I'm sure it's not going to take much longer to enter a summary judgment on that case.
Well, we'll be continuing to watch for developments in that case, all of the cases that we've just spoken about. But we're also next week going to be watching for developments from Capitol Hill and progress on the one big, beautiful bill that is, in its heart, supposed to be a tax and spending package, but does have other things embedded in it, some of which have implications for the judiciary. I know you're watching.
Oh, absolutely. There is one little item in that one big, beautiful bill that basically would take away the judge's contempt power to enforce temporary restraining orders and preliminary injunctions. And not only does it make it prospective, meaning that it would be used in the future, it also is including past actions of contempt. So you've got judges that are considering contempt with respect to the Garcia matter. They're considering attempt on a number of other items. You've got 170 orders that are out there right now by federal district court judges. And the only way that they can have any power to enforce these orders is to be able to use the contempt power. And what they're trying to do, the Republicans snuck this little piece into the bill in the dead of night, literally, to make it so that you give immunity to all of these people, all of Trump's minions and sycophants who have been basically undermining the judges and obstructing these judges' orders. You've got the situation in Maryland with Abrego Garcia, where the judge is trying to do an investigation. All of that would be thrown out if this piece of the bill passed. And what they try and do is try and make it look like it's part of the reconciliation by talking about the money that's being spent by the judges to enforce their orders, when in fact, all they're trying to do is destroy the judiciary and take away their powers.
Never one to mince words. And we covered the waterfront with Nick Akerman. What a treat to have you in person, the former assistant U.S. attorney, former Watergate prosecutor. Nick, thank you. We've got our eyes on the U.S. steel plant outside of Pittsburgh, where President Trump has arrived, and we've got a live shot of him right now. If you're with us on Bloomberg Radio, he's being given a tour of the plant, and we're told getting a bit of a briefing from corporate officials. Of course, Kaylee, this will all lead us up to the big rally that was supposed to begin about 25 minutes ago. He's got a room full of what appear to be hundreds, if not thousands, of steelworkers. We're going to be hearing about this partnership, as he described it, between U.S. Steel and All Nippon Steel.
Yeah, some of those gathered in the room wearing their hard hats, and we understand the president was, just by workers, presented with a golden hard hat, though he is not wearing it currently. We'll see if that makes an appearance on the podium when he begins his remarks. But Joe, of course, the big question we have is to what extent the president is going to detail what exactly a partnership between U.S. Steel and Nippon Steel looks like, what U.S. control in that sense would look like, knowing that the President Trump, very different than candidate Trump in terms of his sentiment around this issue.
Brings us to the golden share, as he's calling it, not to be confused with the gold card. The idea that this Japanese-based company is going to spend the money, make the investment, but the U.S. will maintain a controlling vote, a controlling stake in the company. We're not entirely clear on how that's going to work, and it's not likely that he's going to describe it in this rally, though we're going to have ears on it and bring you his remarks live here on Bloomberg TV and radio when he does reach the stage. If you're with us on Bloomberg TV, you can see he's up to a few other things first, and we'll keep you posted on that as we prepare to assemble our political panel. With us on a big night here for the President of the United States, leaving the bubble to spend time with workers outside Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Stay with us with much more. Alongside Kaylee Lines, I'm Joe Matthew, live from World Headquarters in New York on Bloomberg TV and radio.
This is not the end of DOGE, but really the beginning. My time as a special government employee necessarily had to end. It was a limited time thing. It's 134 days, I believe, which ends in a few days. So that it comes with a time limit. But the DOGE team will only grow stronger over time.
It's Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio alongside Kaylee Lines at World Headquarters in New York. I'm Joe Matthew. Elon Musk there in the Oval Office earlier today promising that his departure is not the end of the DOGE. And joining us now on Balance of Power, This evening's political panel, Bloomberg politics contributor Jeanne Zaino, political science professor at Iona University and Democratic analyst, alongside Republican strategist Lisa Camooso Miller, host of the Friday Reporter podcast, former RNC comms director. Great to see you both here. Jeanne, what's your take on this? You have Elon Musk in the Oval Office with essentially a goodbye party from the President of the United States. But is he actually leaving Washington?
Well, I have to tell you, I was disappointed when that box opened. Donald Trump gave him a golden key, and I wanted it to be a golden chainsaw, so I was very disappointed in that. They said they were all kumbaya. He was going to be around. He was asked by reporters he will be back. But the reality is he needs to do some rehabilitation of his reputation. Now, my question is, how does what he did today help with that? I'm not sure. Lisa probably has some views on this and all her work on crisis communications, but I feel like if you want to rehabilitate, maybe you keep quiet, keep away for a little while, come back. He's not doing that. They are still very friendly. And so he says DOGE will continue just like Buddhism. So there you go.
Well, when we think about what he was communicating, also saying his 5-year-old, he let punch him in the face, and that's why he was in the Oval Office with a black eye, Lisa. We don't have to get into that. But when we think about the substance of what he was there with the president to talk about, they were trying to say he accomplished so much with this DOGE effort. Remembering he came into it promising to cut $2 trillion in spending, and we got nowhere close to that as far as we can tell via the receipts. So what does he really have to show for his 130 days of work?
Well, you know, that's a hard question, Kayleigh. But I think the one thing that he will be able to feel very good about is having demonstrated that he led an effort to slim down the federal government. And I also wonder, he has really sort of stepped into the shrubbery, if you will. You've all seen that meme before. He sort of backed away from so much of the front-facing and the really aggressive-facing messaging that was coming from the White House at the very beginning. And some of it makes me wonder about whether or not it was because of the way he and Donald Trump were interacting with one another, and perhaps the way that he was overshadowing a bit of the successes that the president was trying to notch for himself. But also, too, I think he steps away, to Jeannie's point, to rehabilitate some of his own reputation. He has some concerns about his own businesses and the impact that this has had on that. I'm not certain he goes away, because here's the deal. He was the front face of DOGE. But there are many, many people that were working for him that are still very much embedded in the government and very much doing behind the scenes work that I expect that we will see impact from for many, many months and even years to come.
The Shiner may have been metaphorical today, Jeanne, that he leaves Washington a bit beat up. And I wonder what the lessons or the lesson was that he learned, because DOGE was the hot thing. We have a DOGE caucus still in the House of Representatives. Some state governments even made their own DOGE units. I don't know what they got done. But when you look at the receipts, as Kayleigh mentioned, it makes things pretty clear, to the point where now he's suggesting that the big beautiful bill is not so beautiful. He's learned religion on debt and deficits. He seems bewildered by Washington. How do you see it?
Yeah, if simply as a numbers guy, he's got to be utterly disappointed. I mean, he paid, what, $250,000 for a public role. He was lambasted. His reputation amongst many of his customers is so bad they're putting stickers against him on the back of his product. And what does he have to show for it? He didn't get close, to Kayleigh's point, to the $2 trillion. We still don't know where they are at that number. And yet, what is the administration doing? They are supporting a bill that is going to raise the debt $4 trillion, $4 trillion. So you look at these numbers, DOGE got nothing close to what they said. And the reality is, for all of us who study Washington for so long, none of this is new. I mean, I always keep thinking back to Tom Coburn and the Golden Fleece. People have been trying this for a very long time. Government is not business by design of James Madison. So you cannot use the same tactics and have the same outcomes. And it feels like, reading these interviews, that Elon Musk sort of woke up to that in a sad way. He was, you know, sort of bemoaning the fact that he didn't get as far as he wanted to. So I think there's a lot of lessons. I don't think any of them are ones that are going to make him attracted to coming back to the public sector, except to see his BFF.
Well, yeah, maybe get some ice cream from the White House kitchen, spend a night in the Lincoln bedroom. Lisa, when we consider the actual numbers here, we know the White House next week is preparing to send to the House a rescissions package that includes mostly the funding that was pulled from USAID, NPR, and PBS, something in the tune of about $9 billion. But the Speaker of the House is making quite a big deal out of enacting these rescissions, making permanent these cuts on behalf of this administration and DOGE. Is that going to be enough to offset some of the fiscal hawks who have been also very concerned about the debt and deficit and making it more difficult for this one big, beautiful bill to get through both chambers?
Look, I don't think that that's going to be enough to get that bill through the Senate. I think the Senate has a lot of concerns. There are a lot of factions that are concerned there. I think that the budget hawks will be pleased that there is at least something to show for the hits that they've been taking at home for all of these cuts and the losses and the changes that are happening. People outside of Washington still are very pleased with the idea of slimming down of the federal government. And so I think that that number sounds impressive. I also think that all of us are a study of Washington, as Jeanne mentioned, but I'm not sure that the folks at home really care, provided that they are making cuts, that money is going back into the Treasury and back into our processes. But I remember, Kaylee, you asking just a couple weeks back, how much has there really been cut and how much are they really going to see? Because there has also been a great deal of spending that has gone up over the course of time. And that, I think, is the one thing that does that $9 billion offset what the spending is. I'm not so necessarily sure. I'm not here to do the math for you, but I'm telling you, I think that there is still a lot of work to do in order to get everybody together on this bill.
All right, Lisa Camooso Miller and Jeanne Zaino, our political panel this evening, will be sticking with us, and we'll be back with them for more later this hour. As we are still at this hour, more than half an hour after he was scheduled to begin speaking, keeping our eye just outside of Pittsburgh, where President Trump is at a U.S. Steel facility with a packed room waiting for him that includes our colleague, Bloomberg's Josh Wingrove, who is live on the ground in West Mifflin, Pennsylvania. So, Josh, we understand the president had a bit of a tour to go on before he makes his remarks. Are we expecting him soon?
Yeah, the music is a sign, so I think he's going to be on stage pretty shortly. They gave him a golden hard hat, so, you know, that's also a sign of where this is going. You could look across this crowd, you see American Steel signs and, you know, Trump signs, thank you, President Trump. You do not see a lot of signs about Japan or Nippon Steel. You would be forgiven for missing that that's the name and country of the company that's buying U.S. Steel. But Trump is coming up here shortly, and we'll give some hints about how advanced this deal is and how close they are to finally nailing it down.
All right. Bloomberg's Josh Wingrove landing the plane just as the President of the United States is introduced there. As Kaylee mentioned, this is West Mifflin. This is just outside, about a half-hour drive outside of Pittsburgh, the home of this U.S. Steel plant where the president is just now taking the stage. Kaylee, he got a briefing, as you mentioned. He got a golden hard hat, and now the speech that's been described as a bit of a campaign rally, making his way in front of this crowd full of steel workers, backed by these massive bundled steel rolls that these very steel workers cranked out. This is, of course, the company that All Nippon Steel of Japan wanted to take over, an idea that President Trump opposed on the campaign trail, but we've accelerated this to a bit of a partnership, Kaylee, that includes a golden share owned by the U.S. government.
Well, yeah, and we're wondering how much the president will detail what that partnership actually looks like. As we note here for our audience on Bloomberg Radio, the background does include these massive rolls of steel, a commodity which this administration and President Trump as a candidate deemed so crucial to national security that the making of it should not leave U.S. hands, which is why he was initially opposed to this deal, even if he now is supportive of a partnership that he says will see $14 billion invested into the U.S. economy and the creation of more than 70,000 jobs, of course, jobs of which some of those people gathered in the room to hear from him on are reliant on. And we expect that he will be bringing up the economic impact potentially that this could have.
For our viewers on Bloomberg TV, our listeners on Bloomberg Radio, we will bring you the president's remarks once he gets going and they get through the formalities as he's swaying to Lee Greenwood here to get things rolling. Of course, Kaylee's referring to not only the steel tariffs, but what led to them, and that is steel dumping, something that we talk about with regard to Japan as well as China. The president today suggesting that China violated a big part of the agreement that was made, in his words, over rare minerals. He said, "I'm sure I'll speak to President Xi and hopefully we will work that out," having put up a Truth Social post earlier in the day saying no more Mr. Nice Guy. Joining us now is Mary Lovely, Senior Fellow at the Peterson Institute for International Economics. Mary, it's great to see you as the president prepares to talk about this partnership with Japan-based All Nippon Steel. We've got a whole other story coming out of China, and it does appear as the administration turns the screws once again on high-tech subsidiaries that we are a long way from a deal. Was he talking about some sort of handshake agreement a couple of weeks ago? What is actually in place here?
Well, it's really hard to know. We think that a lot of it was preliminaries and promises to continue talking on specific issues. The issue that the president raised this morning on Truth Social was about Chinese controls on the sale of critical minerals. And apparently the U.S. is not happy with the pace at which those approvals are coming from the Chinese government. The export controls on critical minerals apply to all countries, not just the United States. And there's been some confusion within China about how that whole process works. So President Trump, when he sees that there's a snag in the negotiations, tends to take it to Truth Social, takes it to the air, and I think we're seeing his attempt to push this forward faster.
Well, when we consider the U.S.'s efforts to push this forward faster, is it helpful when, as Joe mentioned, we're seeing a widening of export controls or sanctions that are placed on Chinese technology companies and their subsidiaries, when we have the Secretary of State revoking Chinese students' visas to attend American universities? These are questions that we'll have to save for later, Mary, as we have the president now speaking at the podium in West Mifflin, Pennsylvania. So let's listen live on Bloomberg TV and radio.
We said, let's make it too big to rig, and they made it too big to rig. And this is a much more powerful term than we could have ever had the other way. So a lot of things, God was looking down on us all for a lot of reasons, including right there. A lot of reasons we were blessed, and you're going to be blessed. You're going to see that. It will keep its headquarters in the great city of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where it belongs. For generations, the name United States Steel was synonymous with greatness, and now it will again be synonymous with greatness. That's what it's going to be. The best and strongest steel on earth will forever be made in America and made in Pennsylvania. And I want to thank a man that I saw right at the beginning of this whole thing, during my first term, as we call it, U.S. Steel President Dave Barrett. Dave, thank you very much, wherever you may be. Wherever you may be. Thank you, Dave. And he came to the White House and he said, sir, we're in trouble. We need help. He was put there to save the company, right? I remember it so well, like yesterday. He was put there, they hired him to save the company. And he came up and he said, we need help, sir. I said, what can we do? Because all the steel companies were going south. They were all in trouble. He said, if you could get tariffs, sir, and save this company. And I thought about it. I studied it up real quick. It took me about 2 minutes. And I said, Dave, I think we're going to make you very happy. And we did make you happy, didn't we? We saved the company. We put 25% tariffs on your company. So we had protection. We were protected from outside horrible influence, including dumping, where they were dumping steel all over the United States, and we saved it. It was a great honor, and Dave was really the first one that brought it to my attention, and I appreciate it, Dave. You did a good job. You did a good job. He more than saved the company. He made the company great. This will be a great company in a very short period of time. Also, the vice chairman of Nippon Steel, Takahiro Mori. Takahiro, thank you very much. He's a great guy, highly respected. He's highly respected all over the world for what he's done with steel. He's going to make this is going to be his pet project. It's going to be great. Thank you, Takahiro. Appreciate it. We're also pleased to be joined by a man who's done a fantastic job. He's central. I always say he's central casting. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. Where is Scott? Central casting. Thanks, Scott. We had a good report today. I don't know if you saw. The numbers were through the roof, and there was no inflation. And they said, you know, Trump was right again. They were all saying, oh, inflation, inflation. We're taking in billions and billions of dollars in tariffs and other things, and we're keeping are competitive nations. We're keeping them, they're competitors, and we're keeping them totally at bay. And we right now have the hottest nation anywhere in the world. And 6 months ago, we had a nation that was dying. We had a nation that was cold as ice. And now we have the hottest, most talked about nation anywhere in the world. Anywhere. Good job, Scott. Also, Secretary of Labor, Lori Chavez DeRemer. Lori, thank you very much. Highly recommended by the Teamsters and a couple of others, I have to tell you. And I said, I'll take that. I'll take that. But she's been fantastic. Also, we have some incredible congressmen and women. Mike Kelly, where's Mike? Mike, he's wearing a shirt today. A lot of times he doesn't. If it's cold, he doesn't wear shirts. Thank you, Mike. Dan Muser, who I hear is going to maybe be running for governor. That's what I hear. I hear there's a rumor about that. There's a rumor about that. Another man, yeah, good luck with that, Dan. I'll tell you, if that's your decision, you've got my support. You know that, right? If you run, you've got my support. He's been a guy, don't you think? He's been a great congressman. He's been a great congressman. And if you run, you have my support totally, and you'll win. You'll win. The people are going to get it real fast. Thank you very much. Good luck. Guy Reschenthaler, who is a fantastic person, with a very good friend of mine today, and I appreciate you coming together. And Guy, thank you very much. What a job you've done from the beginning, right? We never had a problem from day one, you and I. Thank you very much, Guy. Great job. Mike Ruley. You know Mike? Where's Mike? Mike? Thank you, Mike. Great job you're doing. Thank you. Really, really good. And another friend of mine, a great hockey player, actually, Pete Stauber. Pete, thank you. What a great hockey player. He was the real deal, right, Pete? He'll even admit it. He's going to admit it. Pennsylvania Senate President Pro Tem Kim Ward. Thank you. Good job, Kim. Good job. Thank you. A woman who's an incredible writer, actually. She understands what they call the Rust Belt. We won't be able to call this section a Rust Belt anymore. It'll be a golden belt. It'll be a golden dome, right? It'll be part of a golden dome that we're building to save everybody's lives. But this is a woman who's really fantastic. She's a brilliant writer. She just got signed up by, of all groups, the Washington Post. That's big time. Selena Zito. Where's Selena? She's around here. Selena, thank you. She understands you people and me better than we do. She understands us, and she got it right from the beginning with Trump, didn't you, Selena? She said right early on, guess what? He's going to win. That was when people were saying, really, is he running? He's only doing this for fun. She said, no, he's going to win. And I wouldn't say it's fun, but boy, are we doing progress, right? We're making big progress. So you have a couple of people here that I wanted to introduce because, you know, being a guy that's watched a lot of football, this man had tremendous courage. He had a lot of grit. And everybody knows he wasn't the largest person on the field at all, but he was, in many ways, the most courageous. Rocky Bleier. Rocky, come up here, Rocky. Come up here. Come up here, Rocky. Come up here, Rocky.
President Trump live in West Mifflin, Pennsylvania at a U.S. steel plant. This is the address that we've been waiting for, and we're going to keep eyes and ears on him as we wait for news on the partnership, as it's been described by the administration, between Japan-based All Nippon Steel and U.S. Steel, where he is now. They'll get through the introductions, and we'll return to our coverage of President Trump speaking as we bring Mary Lovely back into the conversation, senior fellow at the Peterson Institute for International Economics. Mary, whether it's the deal that we're talking about here today, this is a deal that technically has not closed, much like the China trade deal that the president rolled out in the guise of a framework a couple of weeks ago. And that's what we were discussing, the way this seems to have fallen apart, though maybe not, based on the language that we heard today from the president. Is that the danger of rolling out tentative deals before they're actually baked?
Well, of course, there's always a chance that they'll fall apart, but I think there's so much at stake here that there's, you know, at least a a goodwill on each side, and I hate to say that in such an acrimonious situation, but there is a will on each side to get this over the finish line in some form. I don't think anybody's expecting these changes to be very deep or even perhaps even long-lasting, but we do think we'll get through this. I think that the announcement today that's being made in Pennsylvania on Nippon Steel is a good one. The President Trump has had a very broad brush in blaming our friends and allies as well as adversaries for some of the U.S. economic issues, problems. And friends have been asked, what is our role in the U.S. economy, particularly in light of the refusal to let a Japanese company invest in U.S. Steel. So there are some important signals being sent today about the openness of the U.S. to investment, at least from friends and allies. So this is important. It comes at a time when the president is, of course, rolling out more decoupling type policies against China, including, as you mentioned earlier, more export controls, more limits on Chinese companies doing business, and of course the continuing, trade dispute.
Well, yeah, so when we consider those kind of moves that are being made in tandem and add the State Department revoking the visas of Chinese students who want to study in the U.S., Mary, is President Trump creating conditions for which Xi Jinping would be willing to talk to him? He suggested in the Oval Office today it may be time for them to speak, but is Xi going to want to get on the phone?
Well, this has always been a tension in this administration, which is that he has China hawks, including Marco Rubio, who want to decouple more rapidly from China, while the president himself seems more interested in getting a better deal, as he puts it, for the United States and in doing deals and doing business. So this tension is really very obvious this week. With these new rollout of controls and especially the revoking of visas on Chinese students studying here in the United States. This is a very big psychological blow to particularly urban Chinese, people who really are the base of support for the Communist Party in some sense. And this will, I think, lead to a hardening of sentiment against the United States. So I think this was a very big psychological path that we've been taken on this week.
We heard from the Economic Minister of Revitalization in Japan today, and a really interesting statement following meetings with the Treasury and Commerce Secretaries. We know there'll be another round of talks about a potential trade deal with Japan ahead of the G7 next month in Canada. But Mary, the headline is pretty remarkable here from Japan's top trade negotiator that a deal could be reached as soon as next month. As we consider that, we want to bring you back to President Trump speaking live now outside Pittsburgh at US Steel. This is live on Bloomberg.
For the workers, because I didn't give a damn about anybody else, if you want to know the truth. And the rest of them, they'll take care of themselves. But for the workers, and I have no doubt that Nippon and Dave and everybody else, we're all working together. And I'm going to be in Washington. I'm going to be watching over it. And it's going to be great. But there's unbelievable spirit for what you're doing. And I'm telling you, you're going to find out that the great people of Japan, and we love them. You know, Shinzo Abe was my friend. He was a great prime minister of Japan. And unfortunately, he's no longer with us. You know what happened with Shinzo. But he was a great friend of mine, an amazing man. And it's an amazing country, and you're going to have a tremendous relationship. So thank you very much. We very much appreciate it. Very much appreciate it. For more than 124 years, the men and women of U.S. Steel have poured the molten metal and forged the tempered beams that built America's railroads, bridged mighty rivers, and raised up towering skyscrapers like the ones we have in New York. 100 stories high and much higher than that. The city of Pittsburgh used to produce more steel than most entire countries could produce. And it wasn't even close, but our steelworkers know better than anyone. Decades of Washington betrayals and incompetence and stupidity and corruption cost this region over 100,000 steel jobs, and they melted away just like butter melts away. Between the year 2000 and 2016, more than half of all the jobs in Pittsburgh's iron and steel mills were obliterated. They were just absolutely taken away, like you take away candy from a baby. When I came into office 8 years ago, I proclaimed a simple but crucially important principle. If you don't have steel, you don't have a country. You don't have a country. You can't make a military. What are we going to do? Say, let's go to China to get our steel for the army tanks and for the boats and ships. A strong steel industry is not just a matter of dignity or prosperity and pride. It's above all a matter of national security, and it is. You're going to see some amazing things here. That's why I fought for the American steelworker like no president has ever fought before. That's why I won your votes like no president has ever won before. And right from the beginning, it didn't take long. You got it right from the beginning. I think before I even opened my mouth, because even as a private citizen, I used to fight and say, what are you letting all of these countries come in and steal your jobs, bring them to other countries? Why do you let that happen? Not only here, but all over the country. In 2018, I imposed historic tariffs on foreign steel, and the results were amazing. You wouldn't have this plant right now if I didn't put on 25% and 50% tariffs. They were dumping steel, as you know, from China and from all over the world. They were dumping it all over our country, dumping it. And it was bad steel, it was garbage, but it was steel, and it was cheap as hell, and it was a terrible thing. And you wouldn't have had any steel mills. I don't think, Dave, they'd have a steel mill open in the country if we didn't do the tariffs. And it was just in time. It was just in time. They were closing up as fast as you can count. In a few short years, domestic steel production surged by more than 10 million tons. Imports from your foreign competitors dropped by 24% almost immediately. And more than $15 billion of investment poured into American steel throughout the United States, all because you had a president who stood up for our steel workers and put America first. I'm very proud of that one. Stood up for everyone else, too. But then came 4 calamitous years of a president who obviously wasn't doing the job. I'm trying to be nice, so you know, I have to be nice. But what he did to this country is a disgrace. Between the borders, millions and millions of people pouring through our borders from all countries all over the world. They came from the jails of the Congo. They came from all over South America, prisons, gangs, drug dealers, drug merchants. They came from mental institutions, the mentally insane. They were pouring into our country by the millions. They allowed this to happen to our country. But we're moving them out, and we're moving them out fast, and we're bringing them back to where they came from. We're having a lot of problems with the liberal judges in courts, the radical left crazy judges that, you know, they come in without courts. They pour into our country totally unvetted and unchecked. Nobody checked them. Nobody had any idea who they were. 11,888 of them were murderers. 50% of those over 11,000 people that were murderers, 50% murdered more than one person. And these people were allowed to come into our country by the Democrats, and you can never forget what they've done. And it's we've beaten inflation. Look at what we've done. Look at the numbers that came out. The prosperity, everything is good. First time ever, right track, wrong track. We're on a right track. First time in 28 years. But they allowed that to happen. I built almost 700 miles of wall. If we didn't have the wall, we could have never done what we did. Over 700 miles, but still they came because they didn't want to finish. They didn't want to close up any gap, the gaps that we had to keep so that we could get our equipment out, so we could get through. They didn't want to put up the final stages. It would have taken 3 weeks to put up the final stages. They said, no, we don't want the wall built. And I thought they were kidding, but they weren't. They wanted open borders, and what they let into our country can never be forgotten. The last administration granted tens of thousands of job-killing tariff exemptions to your foreign competitors. So They were afraid to take down the tariffs that I imposed because it was so good for our country, so much money. But what they did do, think of this, they gave exemptions, and they were so broad and so deep, and I guess you saw that, but the exemptions that they gave allowed foreign competitors to come in and steal our industry, steal our jobs, and bring them back home, and bring them home by the boatload. Crippling imports of foreign steel skyrocketed over the last 4 years like you have never seen before by over 30%. That's an incredible, crazy number. And imports of steel and rebar from Mexico exploded by more than 1,000%. We were getting our steel from Mexico. We were getting our steel from Canada. We were getting our steel from every place, but right here, it was then that we announced the crown jewel of our steel industry, U.S. Steel, was being sold into foreign hands with no protections for our great steel workers. And I said, there's no way we're going to let that happen. When I was watching over you, you don't even know it, I was watching over you. I tell you, best people. You're the best people. You built this country. You know, you people built this country. You people and others like you built this country. By the time I came into office, many feared that the Mon Valley would lose up to 3,000 steel jobs, that U.S. Steel would close, and it was a fixture of the Pittsburgh skyline. It may never live for another week. We had times we thought we were going to live. You weren't living for another week. But I promised the people of Western Pennsylvania that I would never, ever let that happen. And as president, I kept that promise. Boy, did I keep that promise. So soon after initially taking office, I imposed powerful 25% tariffs on all foreign steel and ended each and every one of the Biden exceptions and exclusions. And today I have a major announcement. And are you ready to hear this? This is on behalf of Scott, Secretary of Treasury, Howard Lutnick, Secretary of Commerce, and all of the great geniuses and people we have working, and they are smart, but I don't think you'd be a good steel worker, Scott. I'm sorry. We're going to have to put a little more muscle content into that guy. But he's great. He's great at what he does. We are going to be imposing a 25% increase. We're going to bring it from 25% to 50%, the tariffs on steel into the United States of America, which will even further secure the steel industry in the United States. Nobody's going to get around that. So we're bringing it up from 25%. We're doubling it to 50%. And that's a loophole. And by the way, I have to tell you, I believe that this group of people that just made these investments right now are very happy, because that means that nobody's going to be able to steal your industry. It's at 25%, they can sort of get over that fence. At 50%, they can no longer get over the fence. So congratulations to everybody, and to you for making a great deal. You just made a better deal, right? I said to the group, would you rather have a 40% increase? Because I was thinking about 40 when I came. I said, would you rather have a 40% or a 50%? They said, we'll take 50. I said, I had a feeling you were going to say that. So congratulations. Also, congratulations to Dave, because you got this whole thing started. Congratulations. Great job. Great job. The people here understand the word tariff, and you understand it better than the people on Wall Street. But now the people on Wall Street are finding out. They're saying, wow, you know, Trump was right. You saw today they had an announcer, Joe Kiernan, CNBC, Maria Bartiromo, who's so fantastic on Fox Business. And they were saying, you know, Trump was right. Look at these numbers. The numbers got released today at 8 o'clock in the morning, and it showed no inflation and tremendous income jumps for workers and for the people of our country. And they go, wow, he was right. He was right. But you knew that. You knew that before Wall Street. The workers knew that. We don't want America's future to be built with shoddy steel from Shanghai. We want it built with the strength and the pride of Pittsburgh. It's Pittsburgh steel, it's U.S. steel, and it's going to be something even more special when you get all that billions of dollars of new equipment that they're going to be investing right here. Billions and billions of dollars. Since I opposed our steel tariffs, and you know, I said that tariff to me is the most beautiful word in the dictionary. I love the word so much. I've always loved it. For 40 years, I've loved it. For 40 years, I didn't understand why people weren't in this country using tariff. They use tariffs to kill us. They use tariffs to take our businesses, not only steel, other businesses too. And we never knew how to use tariffs back because we had people in the White House that either didn't care or weren't very smart or both. And it really starts with the White House. It's very simple. It starts with the White House. But I said, it's my favorite word in the dictionary, the word tariff. And I got slaughtered in the fake news. I got killed. They said, what about love? What about wife and family? What about God, they said. So they made the word tariff be my fourth favorite word. And now I have no complications. It's my fourth favorite word. God, wife, family, all of the different things, but they did. It's not even believable. I said, tariffs is my favorite word, and I got slaughtered by these people. But we've had a lot of fun. We've jousted for a long time with the fake news. But companies all over the world have announced nearly $10 billion in new investments in steel, just in steel alone. But the Nippon investment we're announcing today blows them all away with a record-setting, and this was just heard of. We just came out a little while ago. $14 billion commitment to the future of this company. That is the single largest investment. That's the single largest investment of any kind in any industry. So not only steel, go all the way back. You go into fracking, you go into anything you want to go into because you're a good fracking state too. We love fracking, by the way. But think of this, the largest investment of any kind in the history of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And we also will be the largest investment in the history of American steel industry. There's never been a $14 billion investment in the history of the steel industry in the United States of America. And Pittsburgh will very soon be respected around the world as the Steel City again. So I want to congratulate you. As part of this monumental commitment, Nippon will also invest $2.2 billion to increase steel production here in the Mon Valley Works, specifically allocated to Mon Valley, along with $200 million for the Advanced Technology Research and Development Center that's being built already in Pennsylvania. So I want to congratulate you. And in addition, another $7 billion to modernize steel mills, expand ore mines, and build state-of-the-art facilities in Indiana, Minnesota, Alabama, and Arkansas. So I want to thank you and congratulations to those states. Congratulations. And the bulk of these expenditures will be made in the next 14 months. It's going to happen fast. You're going to be very busy watching trucks go back and forth, loaded up with cash, or its equivalent. And it will create and save over 100,000 American jobs, including 14,000 jobs in Pennsylvania. Thank you. Very good. And by the way, your local union, I won't talk about your national union because I don't think he knows what the hell he's talking about. But your local union, I want to tell you, is so unbelievable. They've been great. I have to tell you that. This is an incredible deal for American steelworkers, and it includes vital protections to ensure that all steelworkers will keep their jobs and all facilities in the United States will remain open and thriving. U.S. Steel will maintain. I don't want to fight with those guys. They look pretty well. I'll never fight them. U.S. Steel will maintain all of its current operating blast furnaces at full capacity for a minimum of the next 10 years, and we have that as a commitment. But I don't even think you have to worry about that. You're not going to have to even think about that. Frankly, it won't matter because they're going to be here for a long time, a lot longer than that. There will be no layoffs and no outsourcing whatsoever, and every U.S. steel worker will soon receive a well-deserved $5,000 bonus. That's very rare. Thank you very much. That's great. That's importantly. For what you've gone through a lot. It's closing, it's not closing, it's opening, and you want to stay here. People say, well, we'll move to another place, or we'll do chips, or we'll do something like chips. Somehow you don't want to do chips. I'm looking at these giant guys with the giant arms. You're not going to like doing chips. Most importantly, U.S. Steel will continue to be controlled by the USA. Otherwise, I wouldn't have done the deal. I wouldn't have done it. But the USA, and we're going to be working together, and you're going to look at your board. You have a great board, and we're going to have an amazing alliance. In this audience are many of the incredible workers who will really be bringing our steel industry roaring back to life, and it's going to roar, including a man who has supported me from the very beginning, the founder and steelworker of Steelworkers for Trump in this area. I have some of these guys, they're great. And I had somebody in Michigan that was so great. I love that guy, and I love this guy. He's been with me from the beginning. Brian Pavlik. Brian, come up here. Come up here, Brian. Brian's been with us from the beginning. Oh, look at him, big guy. Thank you, Brian. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Oh, yeah. Yes, you did. It's a great day to be an American steelworker. It's an honor to be on the stage with my hero and the greatest president ever, Donald J. Trump.
President Trump relinquishing the microphone for now as he rallies with U.S. steelworkers in West Mifflin, Pennsylvania, as we're listening live on Bloomberg TV and radio. The president obviously touting what he's describing as a partnership between U.S. Steel and Japan's Nippon Steel, touting billions of dollars in investment, he says, is coming into the U.S., while maintaining that it is going to be a U.S.-controlled company. Also making some news in regard to tariffs, announcing he will be raising the steel and aluminum tariffs that are currently in place from 25% to 50%, a doubling of them. So let's get some reaction now as a steel worker is speaking instead of the president, and turn to this evening's political panel. Bloomberg politics contributor and Democratic analyst Jeanne Zaino is still with us, alongside Republican strategist Lisa Camooso Miller. So, Jeanne, obviously he is in Pennsylvania. He is speaking directly to steel workers, suggesting that he's helping them. He is protecting their jobs through this deal, after saying, while campaigning in Pennsylvania just months ago, that this kind of deal actually was going to put them at risk. Does the message resonate when you've changed your tune like that?
Well, we can see it certainly resonating with all of the individuals in the audience here today. But I think, so many questions loom. What is the difference, for instance, between this deal and what President Trump and President Biden opposed just a few months ago, literally? So what is the difference? I don't think I have clarity on that yet. And I also think it is just fascinating to see that they are there cheering what is going to be a Japanese-owned subsidiary. They want it wholly owned. It will not be U.S.-owned. So good in the short term, yeah, but I think there are long-term implications.
Let's hear the president in his announcement here. Granted, largely a campaign-style rally, but made some news here, as Kayleigh mentioned, with this doubling of the tariff on steel. Here's President Trump from a few moments ago.
We are going to be imposing a 25% increase. We're going to bring it from 25% to 50%, the tariffs on steel into the United States of America, which will even further secure the steel industry in the United States. Nobody's going to get around that.
Immediate impact on shares of U.S. Steel as well as Cleveland-Cliffs, both rising in after-hours trading. Lisa, this good politics for President Trump beyond the people in that room?
You know, Joe, I think it remains to be seen. I think there are a lot of industries that are going to be really surprised and really worried about what kind of impact this could possibly have. And the other thing is that's interesting to me is the timing. He waited until the market was closed. He waited to have this conversation. And he also, facts are kind of an obstacle that he doesn't find to be difficult to overcome, right? He talks about this in a way that is a celebration. He talks about it in a way that that helps the audience and the people around him believe that it in fact is a good decision. And they will parrot what he says, regardless of the facts that support what is actually going to go down. And so that, to me, is one that I think there are a lot of people in industry that are going to be concerned about what this possibly could mean. Also, too, though, we saw this week alone, there are a lot of folks that say he says what he says, and then he goes back on what it is that he says will happen. So that, too, is another, is this a carrot and a stick kind of opportunity? It's really unclear. And to me, just as Jeanne had said, the facts and the details are unclear to us now. But right at first blush, it feels like one that potentially could be very unhelpful to the folks in that region.
Well, Lisa makes an excellent point that the markets are closed, but we are seeing post-market trading and benefit for some of these steel companies. Cleveland-Cliffs now extending its post-market gain to about 9%. Nucor shares also are on the rise by about 4%. Not as much action for U.S. Steel, the very company that, of course, is where President Trump is spending his time this evening. But Lisa just made an important point that brings us back to the taco trade narrative that we were talking about earlier this week, Jeanne, which there's no guarantee that when he announces an elevation in tariffs, that they're going to stay at that elevated level, that it's not easily something that can be rolled back. But largely, it seems we have seen that applied to tariffs on specific countries, not these kind of sectoral tariffs applied under different authority like Section 232, that he is also looking at expanding potentially to areas like semiconductors and pharmaceuticals. Yeah,
and that's a really good point, because the reason he can do this, of course, is because there is a national security interest here. And so, you know, I think the reality is that these could very well stick. But again, the problem is the market doesn't like uncertainty. We really don't know. And, you know, the president is somebody who wants to make the case that this deal is going to give the United States a huge, huge sort of control over what's going on at U.S. Steel and Nippon when this deal, whatever the parameters are, is put in place. But you hear him very clearly talking about 10 years. 10 years is not a long time. And part of what I think is missing in a lot of the president's rhetoric, and this is not just Trump, it's all of our leadership, is the impact of AI on these very jobs and what we are doing to educate these very workers cheering him now and their children and grandchildren for a future in which these type of jobs, even if these factories are here, may not be the same as they are now. So I think this is an enormously complicated policy. And he's talking about the exciting part now, the 14 billion, the 70,000 jobs. But some of this may be very short-lived as well.
Lisa, the president's delivering a Made in the USA message here, making a national security argument. Is he handicapping himself by introducing a Japanese company to this conversation?
You know, Joe, the thing about the way that the president has taken on this discussion about tariffs and interaction with other governments and other countries has really muddied the waters as it relates to the way that we have always done business before. So while ordinarily that would be the reaction and that would be the thing that we'd be most concerned about, it seems to me like the president is trying to blur the lines and change the way that work and industry is done, not only in the U.S., but all across the globe. And so from my point of view, as much as I would like to say that that's historically how it has gone down, he's trying to show that he can raise and reach across the continent and across the oceans in order to make these kinds of things happen. And he wants to show that he's a deal maker.
Well, certainly, and that is in regard to multiple things, be it trade deals, deals with Congress, deals in the geopolitical realm. Lisa, how should we be considering, though, that he specifically chose to go to Pennsylvania today to tout this investment, making a trip to Pittsburgh in a battleground state, which he spent the beginning of his remarks talking about, which he obviously won in 2024, shouting out candidates that he hopes can win in elections to come. How should we think about how these kind of moves in Pennsylvania factor into the midterms in 2026?
Well, look, I mean, more than ever before, local media is national media and vice versa. They all are interchangeable. He's going to take this snapshot and use this all across the country. He did a very strong acknowledgement of Selena Zito, who's a very smart and thoughtful conservative writer that's right there in the audience. He is going to talk about jobs. He's going to talk about the fact that he's going into what he called what has historically been known as the Rust Belt. Now he's going to rename it something otherwise. To me, it is definitely strategic. It is most definitely political, but it is also one of those things that he is looking in Pennsylvania and he's seeing a very incredibly strong political candidate in the governor that is there, that is someone that people talk about as a candidate for president in possibly in 4 years. And it was a strategic move and one that he sees as an opportunity in Pennsylvania, which he absolutely wants to make sure is shored up for himself and whoever else it is that he decides ought to be the candidate in 4 years.
Governor Shapiro is not there tonight in the sea of red shirts and red MAGA hats. But it's an interesting question, Jeanne. You wonder, the president started this speech about U.S. Steel by talking about the Pennsylvania election results. He said they never had a chance in Pennsylvania. Does he hold the state because of an event like this?
He really does. I mean, I'm just watching this, and you think back just a few years to imagine a Republican with that kind of audience. I mean, we've become sort of used to this with Donald Trump, but you have to give him credit. He has remade the Republican Party for better or for worse, according to some people. But that also has divided the Republican Party. I mean, he is there today announcing 50% tariffs on steel. That is something that was anathema to Republicans not just a few years ago. Tariffs, his favorite word, which we're all used to, something that Republicans haven't engaged in. They want free trade. So he's divided the party that way. He has also made it difficult for the Democrats to reach out to their usual traditional constituency. Just the other day, there was David Axelrod talking about the fact that Democrats have become this elite college-educated party. All that, a lot of that, I should say, is due to what Donald Trump has done. So he has made enormous strides, but it also does create this division. And I can't help but wondering, is there going to be a candidate, whether it's 2026 or 2028, that steps up and says, you sold what is in a U.S. institution in U.S. Steel to a Japanese company, and now we are just a couple years away when there's no more oversight from the government. And what does that mean for us in Pennsylvania, in Pittsburgh, in the U.S., and our national security? That is a real selling point for some people. The union, not that long ago, was making that same case. So I think there's opportunity here from a political perspective, but boy, you got to give Donald Trump credit for really, really knowing how to move this Republican Party in the way he has in the last several years.
Well, Jeanne, as you mentioned the union, we should note we are still keeping an eye on the activities in West Mifflin, Pennsylvania. And we did just hear from the United Steelworkers president, Jason Zugai, who called this pact a merger. That is the language he decided to use. President Trump, of course, calling it a partnership. The question is whether or not actually in the financials, Joe, that is what this turns out to be. As clearly the union is trying to characterize this as two entities coming together, not one entity taking over the other. But when we consider that union, and Lisa, Jeanne was just speaking to this, and Joe was kind of alluding to it in his questioning, the idea that this used to be reliable Democratic voters, the union vote. And we know to the extent to which both Joe Biden and then Kamala Harris after him were battling Donald Trump for this group of voters in particular in 2024. Who is going to be able to claim them in 2026 and looking forward to 2028? Or is it going to continue to be a kind of division between union leadership and union membership in large part?
I think that will stay the same for some time. I mean, it's really going to be hard to see how the leadership and the membership all sort of come together. However, we have absolutely seen a remaking of the party. I mean, Jeanne hit the nail on the head when she talked about talking about the steel industry and talking about the overlap. all of these trade deals are trade deals that I saw when I was in the U.S. Department of Commerce that were very, very differently handled and very, very differently announced and moderated. And so this is a brand new, different approach to the way things are done. But inside of Washington, we're all twisting our pearls and we're worried about what that sounds like. But outside of Washington, D.C., in states like Pennsylvania, they don't care about Republicans and Democrats. They care about how it affects their bottom line in their homes, whether or not it means that they can buy cars at an affordable price and at an affordable rate. Donald Trump doesn't see it as Republican and Democrat. He sees it as winning and losing. And that is precisely the way that he's going to continue to operate. And so as much as he relies on the party and needs the mantle of the party to be successful as a candidate himself, and in growing the MAGA movement that he is absolutely the head of, it is one that we have to consider that people don't necessarily care one way or the other, provided their government is doing what it said it would do, and that is to give them the great relief that they're looking for. And so I think that it'll continue to move and it'll continue to change. And unions themselves, just like the political parties, are having to figure out how to adjust to the changing factions as they are shifting.
It's interesting, Jeanne, one of the workers who was just speaking at the podium there, and I think we had 4 or 5 get a chance to get on the microphone, had "Let's Go Brandon" on the side of his hard hat. How would this merger, as it was just described at the microphone, have gone over in this room if it were rolled out by Joe Biden?
You know, it's a fascinating question because, of course, to a certain extent, this was Joe Biden's support group. I mean, this is a guy who spent...
He thought so.
He thought so. And then, of course, the Democrats lost 2024. They lost Pennsylvania. So, you know, I think it's a great question as to how this could have gone over if it was Joe Biden. Yeah. Certainly not in this way, given how Joe Biden was performing towards the end of his time running.
Yep, and Joe Biden no longer president, but Donald Trump is, and he is back at the podium. So let's go and listen live here on Bloomberg TV and radio.
NVIDIA, $500 billion. TSMC, if you look at this one, TSMC, and this is a company the biggest in the world for chips, $200 billion at least. Amazon, $4 billion. Johnson & Johnson, $55 billion. Merck, Stellantis, General Motors are putting in billions and billions of dollars. We have it all done. It's going to be all with very little inflation. In fact, it was 2.1% in April, way down. You went through inflation that was probably the greatest inflation in the history of our country over the last 4 years. And now we have it down to around 2%. Grocery prices are down. Mortgage rates are down. Energy prices are down. And gasoline prices over Memorial Day weekend were the lowest they have been since 2003. Think of that. In fact, in a couple of states, gasoline, $1.98 a gallon. When have you heard that number lately? Income soared in April, up 0.8%, almost triple expectations, and we achieved the largest drop in consumer prices and the largest increase in consumer confidence since the pandemic, and actually probably about 20 years before the pandemic. Last month, we also cut the trade deficit in half, and that's the story of today. They can't believe it. The numbers just came. We cut, before we even get started, actually, we cut it in half, the trade deficit. And very importantly, have stopped the invasion of illegal aliens who are undercutting your wages and stealing your jobs. You saw that last month. 99.999%. Can you imagine? That was our cut. It's been, the border is closed, but it's open, and it'll always be open to people that want to come into our country legally. We want to have people come in legally, but we don't want to have them come in the way they allowed to come in. We've ended the flood of criminals, gang members, murderers, drug dealers, and human traffickers, and we're sending them back to the places from which they came. And the future of American workers is only getting brighter. I said before, and I'll say it again, we have the hottest country right now in just 4 months. But actually, you have to go back to November 5th. Since November 5th, that was Election Day, we had the greatest election victory, they say, in 129 years, the most consequential election in 129 years. I don't know what 129 years was, but we'll check it out later on. We'll find out. Must have been something pretty good. But we have the most consequential. We won every swing state. We won the popular vote. We won the districts, 2,750 to 505. We're doing a job, and you're doing a job, and it's only because of you that we could have had that success. We're right now on the verge of passing the largest working class tax cuts in American history. We got to get that beautiful, big bill, beautiful, beautiful as it is. We got to get it passed. The Senate, call your senators. And I'll tell you, you have great people representing you. Your senators, your congressmen, you have great people. Every single Democrat House member voted to impose the largest tax hike in history. The Democrats are voting for the largest, highest tax hike in history. I'd never heard of it before. Meanwhile, our one big, beautiful bill will keep income taxes at the current rates and deliver no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, and no tax on Social Security for our seniors. And we're going to make the interest payments, as you know, on cars. We're going to take the car payments, and we're going to make them, those interest payments. You buy a car, you borrow money. We're going to make interest payments tax deductible, but only if the car is made in America, and that means made with American steel and steel from U.S. Steel. And we're permanently expanding the child tax credit, and we're creating a special Trump account for every newborn child, starting them off with a $1,000 credit to be invested over the course of their life. A little baby is born, they're going to start off with $1,000. And if we do a good job of investing their money, we're going to go with one of the investing guidelines. Who the hell knows if they're any good, but they have a chance to be very rich. It's going to be very cute to see. We're going to follow it very closely. And critically, the bill includes the largest reductions to wasteful spending in a generation or more, slashing more than $1.6 trillion in waste, fraud, and abuse. And the one big beautiful bill, and get out there and get your congressmen and your senators and any other senator or congressman you know, get them to vote for it, because the Democrats are willing to vote against the biggest tax deduction or tax decrease in history. This is the biggest tax cut, think of it, in the history of our country. If it doesn't get approved, you're going to have a 68% tax increase. Lots of luck. And the Democrats would rather have you have a tax increase, think of that, of 68%. They would rather have that happen than vote for a bill where you get the biggest tax cut. So there's something wrong. You know, all my life I grow up, I watch politics, and I've always watched politicians say, we will cut your taxes, we will cut. These Democrats want to raise your taxes, and in theory, a 68% increase. One other thing I did, and you probably saw it last week, you know, we pay the highest drug prices and pharmaceutical prices anywhere in the world by far. Other countries pay sometimes 1/10 of what we pay. A pill that costs $20, we spend $200, $250, $270 in many cases. It's the most unfair thing I've ever seen. And last week I did what had to be done, and it wasn't easy against the biggest lobby anywhere probably in the world, most powerful lobby, the drug companies, and I'm not even calling them bad, but they were able to do things. They're going to be fine, by the way. They're going to just stabilize. But we're going to now call a favored nations where we will pay the lowest price anywhere in the world, and they have to match it. We will be cutting your drug bill by 85 and even 90%. You know, I was very proud in my first administration. You may have remembered, I called for a major press conference because we were the first, I was the first one in 28 years to lower drug prices. They were lowered 0.25% over a period of a year. And I was so proud of that because nobody had ever had an administration where prices of drugs went down. 0.25%, not much. Now we're going to be lowering your drug costs by 90%, by 85%, by 75%, by numbers that nobody's ever heard of before. We will be paying equal to the lowest price of drugs and pharmaceuticals anywhere in the world. Have fun, because that's a lot of money. That's going to bring down Medicare. It's going to bring down the cost of, think of it, Medicaid. It's going to have an effect on everything, but it's going to have the biggest effect on your wallet. You're going to be saving a tremendous amount of money, and nobody else would do that but me. I have taken on some rather harsh critics over that because, again, that's the biggest lobby. They spend billions and billions and billions of dollars a year not to have that done. But I said it's really time to do it. So you're going to have the lowest drug prices anywhere in the world. With one big, beautiful bill, we will protect over 7 million jobs, raise take-home pay for American families by up to $13,000 per household, and reduce taxes for working-class Americans by as much as 13%. Those are big numbers. The bill will also remove 1.4 million illegal aliens from Medicaid and protect the programs for truly needy Americans. And it includes funding to hire 3,000 new Border Patrol agents and 10,000 new ICE agents. And these people like you, these are heroes. The jobs they have done, they go into areas that are so dangerous, it's unbelievable, but they're tough, they're smart, and they love our country. So I want to just thank ICE, and I want to thank the Border Patrol, and I want to thank law enforcement in general. They've been incredible. Really incredible. And I'll never forget our firemen. I don't know if we have firemen here today, but we're never going to forget our firemen. They do a great job. Over the past 4 months, we've accomplished more than most administrations achieve in 4 years or even 8 years. We've done this in 4 months. We've done something on spirit and optimism and pride, which is sweeping across our land. And with the announcement, it's surging like never before here in Western Pennsylvania. Remember, the entire world is watching us today. I'm making a speech, and I have millions and millions. Look at all the fake news back there. Look at that. That's a lot of fake news, come to think of it. Now, they've been pretty good to us here. They've, gave us a reasonably accurate display. But all over the world, look at that. All over the world, they're watching your local region and how well it's doing and how well it's going to do. For generations, the workers of this region have always been there for our country when we needed you most. You built this country from Pittsburgh to Pottstown, from Bethlehem to Hopewell, and from Washington County to right here in Western Mifflin. The foundries and blast furnaces of Pennsylvania have smashed foreign armies, strengthened the hulls of the world's greatest navy, raised up majestic cities, won 2 world wars, and made America into the richest, strongest, and most powerful country on the face of the earth. And it's suffered greatly over the last 4 years, but we're going to get it back, and we're going to get it back fast. It's almost back already. It suffered, though. It suffered. I'm not going to make any excuses. It suffered with incompetent, radical left lunatics. But under our leadership, we're making it richer, stronger, and more powerful than ever before. And that's why I want to thank you very much. And thank you, Prime Minister, and thank everybody. They all knew what was happening here. With the help of patriots like you, we're going to produce our own metal, unleash our own energy, secure our own future, build our country, control our destiny, and we are once again going to put Pennsylvania steel into the backbone of America like never before. The golden age of America has only just begun, and together we are going to make America great again, greater than ever before. Thank you very much, Pennsylvania, and God bless America. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Speaking live on Bloomberg TV and radio, President Trump live in Pittsburgh, just outside of Pittsburgh at the U.S. steel plant where He was doing the victory lap here on what was framed as a partnership. Some called it a merger between All Nippon Steel and U.S. Steel. You're seeing the Trump dance for those of you with us now on Bloomberg TV as he speaks to an adoring crowd of steelworkers here, making news with the doubling of a tariff on steel specifically from 25% to 50%. We should note quickly, by the way, we have no evidence of gasoline selling for less than $2 a gallon anywhere in the country. The AAA average right now is just over $3, $3.16. Also, his reference to mortgage rates, not entirely true here as we start seeing rates rise again. We just want to correct the record on that as we turn to Jared Bernstein for more now after what we heard. The former chair of the White House Council of Economic Advisors in the Biden administration is now senior fellow for economic policy at the Center for American Progress. And Jared, it's great to see you here. As the president dances his way off the stage, there are a lot of questions about the makeup of this arrangement. Based on what you're seeing with reports of a golden share held by the United States government, what do we call this? Is it a takeover? Is it a merger? Or is it a partnership?
Something between merger and partnership sounds more accurate to me, but I don't think we know the details yet. I understand this golden share business is supposed to give the American government as well as the American members of the board leverage in making decisions about where U.S. Steel will be headed. But this is, bottom line, just a very different deal than either former President Biden was interested in, or, for that matter, President Trump. So he's turned on his heels on this one, and I'm not exactly sure I know why. I will tell you, Joe, that there were many of us who actually long thought that the Nippon deal sounded pretty good. So I don't think you should assume that, I'm not saying you do, I don't think anyone should assume that, this is somehow Trumpian chaos or analogous to the trade war, the reckless business of going to 50% on a steel tariff. This may be the right move for U.S. Steel.
Well, when we consider that, especially through the lens, Jared, of job protection for these steel workers, is that really something, as the president was saying, this guarantees that U.S. steel workers will stay employed? For how long can he really guarantee that when we consider changes in technology and just the way in which manufacturing is actually conducted?
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, job guarantees are something every president talks about whenever they speak about a situation like this, and we should pretty heavily discount that. I mean, certainly in the near term, there's a lot of pressure on Nippon Steel to preserve jobs, and let's face it, that's a pretty tough union. It's a powerful union, United Steelworkers. So I think that those jobs are a lot more protected than they've ever been. Certainly the tariff is a piece of that. I think the important point there, by the way, is that something like 80, for every one steel worker that produces domestic steel, there are 80 workers that use steel as an input to what they're doing. And of course, even 25% makes their work a lot more expensive, and 50 doubles that.
The president talked a lot about steel dumping from other countries. Jared, how much of an issue was that when you spent time in the White House? And what will, in fact, be the impact of 50% versus 25%? If you can go a little bit further with that when it comes to the economic implications here nationally.
Let me start from the second part of your question, because we know a little bit about that because we've been here before. Yep. Just reiterating what I said before, far more workers, 80-1, far more workers work with steel, whether it's domestic steel or imported steel, than produce steel. So the number of steel workers in this country is probably around 160K, something like that. There are millions of workers who are in the auto sector, in computerization, in appliances, in clean energy, who use steel as an input. So this makes their work tremendously more expensive. It gets passed through to consumers. It's just a highly inefficient way to go about helping our domestic steel producers. Now, about dumping, there are definitely countries, and China is an offender, who have dumped steel in this country. But the way to approach this is much more targeted, much more scalpel and much less sledgehammer. And so here you're, as with all of the Trump sweeping tariffs, here you're pulling in perfectly legitimate traders with unfair traders.
Well, so when we consider the impact economically, Jared, not just of the steel sectoral tariffs, but the other sectoral tariffs in place, the 10% base rate that is still in place, the fentanyl-related tariffs that a court is ruling while the appellate process plays out on IEEPA can stand for now. When are you expecting all of that to translate in a more material way into the hard data? And what translation comes first, an impact potentially on the labor market or on price pressures American people see?
Look, we may actually be seeing a little bit of this already. This is something I've been kind of obsessing about for a long time, because you'll remember you and I had these conversations where we had a good economy but bad vibes. Now we have, now we have vibes that are worse than ever, and we're seeing some slippage in some of the hard data. So, for example, in the revised Q1 GDP that came out, I believe, on Thursday of this week. Consumer spending, which was already pretty weak, 1.8%, coming off of 4% in the prior quarter, was marked down to 1.2%. That is quite slow in terms of consumer spending. That's real. And that, of course, has been an engine of growth in this economy. That comes first. And then if that should stick, that's a one-quarter result. And we saw some slippage today in the personal income report. We saw a little bit of an elevated savings rate, which could be interpreted as precautionary, which also could hurt consumer spending. If those things stick, and that's an if at this point, you never want to build a 1 quarter or a 1 month story in our economy. That's not a trend, that's a data point. But those are signals, those are signs of a potential consumer pullback. And of course, we know that businesses are very reluctant to invest in projects given the extent of the chaos out there.
Well, this is real politics meets economics here. The idea of the vibes catching up with the data or vice versa in this particular case. When you see an event like that, Jared, I know you were watching and listening along with us to see President Trump with this adoring crowd of steel workers talking about keeping jobs here in the United States, preserving the steel industry in Pittsburgh. Is that enough to keep the vibes going, even if the hard data may not be there?
Certainly among his supporters. I mean, I think his supporters are pretty inoculated to whatever else happens in the world. And I think one of the problems that the president is facing is that, his supporters are a relatively small and perhaps a somewhat dwindling group. So if you look at the unpopularity of his trade war, it reaches all the way from, the Wall Street Journal to MSNBC with, Bloomberg and everybody else in between. Meaning that you're very hard pressed to find someone who's not a diehard Trump supporter, including people who voted for him who are not MAGA voters, but wanted to give him a chance to lower prices and maybe lower interest rates. Obviously, tariffs push up prices. We've seen some of the fiscal recklessness putting some pressure on interest rates. So he is not delivering on these critical campaign promises. Now, watching that speech, I am reminded of just what a master he is in that setting. I mean, I think he's just tremendously effective in that setting. And he really empathizes with his crowd. I don't mean sympathizes, I mean empathizes. He feels what they feel what he feels. The connection there is really strong. But, as we were just discussing, I'm an economist. I do trends and numbers and economics, not so much vibes or emotional connections. And I think on the economy, he has a real problem that's maybe starting to show up in some of the data.
All right, Jared Bernstein, former chair of the White House Council of Economic Advisors under the Biden administration, now senior fellow for economic policy at the Center for American Progress. Thank you so much. Joining us, of course, with his reaction to what we heard President Trump speaking about in West Mifflin, Pennsylvania, just moments ago, a deal between U.S. Steel and Nippon Steel.
After about 4 times, I said, these people really want to do a great thing. They really want it. And they're putting up, billions of dollars, and they're going to do this plant and other plants, and it's great, and you're going to have control, you're going to maintain control, and nobody would put up money like that. And every time, Dave, I think you'll say, every time they came in, the deal got better and better and better for the workers, because I didn't give a damn about anybody else, if you want to know the truth.
Back with us live here on Bloomberg TV and radio for more from West Mifflin, Pennsylvania, is Bloomberg's Josh Wingrove. So, Josh, he did talk a lot about this deal. He characterized it as a partnership. The United Steelworkers president characterized it as a merger. Are you leaving this U.S. Steel facility with a greater sense of what exactly we should be calling this thing?
little bit. I mean, this kind of just felt like a housewarming party for someone whose like conditional offer has been accepted, right? It all feels just a little premature right now. We just don't know whether this is going to go through, but everyone in this event treated it like it was a done deal, including the president. He did put in sort of some details. He claimed that US Steel will continue to operate its blast furnaces for at least 10 years under control by Nippon Steel. He claimed there'd be no layoffs. He said there'd be a $5,000 bonus for workers, and he confirmed that $14 billion investment figure, which is above the acquisition price, and detailed some of the places that will go. So that was more detail than we'd had previously. And of course, the big news from it is he announced that he was separately doubling his steel tariff to 50% from 25%, which will of course benefit domestic producers, including the apparently soon-to-be Japanese-owned US Steel. What we did not get was detail around some of the mitigation provisions that we understand to be part of the negotiations, part of the fine print that's still being worked on. We don't know about details about board seats or, the American leadership that has to be required of the company. He did say the company's headquarters would remain right here in Pittsburgh. So we did get a little more detail, not full detail, but both he, Dave Burritt, the head of US Steel, and Takahiro Mori, the vice chairman of Nippon Steel, all treating this as essentially something that's going to go through.
Great reporting, Josh. It's great to have you on the scene. Bloomberg's Josh Wingrove as the crowd leaves the room in Pennsylvania. We reassemble our political panel this evening. Bloomberg's politics contributor, Democratic analyst Jeanne Zaino is with us alongside Republican strategist Lisa Camooso-Miller. Lisa, Josh just said a line that was remarkable. Japanese-owned U.S. Steel. How did the president succeed in making that good domestic politics?
Well, that's certainly what the message was up until recently, and it sounds like in the reports that I'm reading in the time that this has all been unfolding is that it sounds to me like a partnership. It sounds like an infusion of $14 billion into the U.S. government coffers and the U.S. economy. So that is going to be the way the president is going to offer that up as a win. He says it's 70,000 jobs that'll be created. So the president's seeing all of these sort of moments and opportunities to really celebrate and approve of the messaging and the words that'll be coming on, as it relates to what this is. But Joe, as we said, the devil will be in the details and how this all comes together. And he took it right to Pennsylvania in a place where that would be battleground and that would be ground zero for negative reactions if they were to be happening. So certainly this was a calculated and conditioned, planned event for the president to celebrate this and to message it right from the get-go at ground zero in a way that he could tell the people that's why he accepted it. That's why he likes what's happening here, because it means money for the economy and jobs for the people.
Well, and how much the president actually physically going to U.S. Steel to talk about this, Jeanne, is about him knowing that Pennsylvania in 2026 in the midterms, just like it was in 2024, will be again in 2028 in all likelihood, is going to be crucial.
It's so important, and it looked very much like all of those rallies that we all sat throughout 2024 not that long ago. And certainly Pennsylvania continues to be ground zero, and he reminded us today in the Oval Office with Elon Musk that he won all 7 swing states, including Pennsylvania. Something that Josh said I think is so important. This question of, is this premature? Now, I'm not saying Josh asked that, but it's felt a little premature. And as I'm watching this, I'm wondering, is this Donald Trump's mission accomplished? He goes out there and he makes this case. If this thing falls through, or if it truly looks like your question, Joe, to Lisa, which is, a Japanese foreign company with a documented history, as the union keeps reminding us, of violating U.S. law, now owns this grand U.S. company that means so much to the people of Pittsburgh. That can play very badly in a place like Pittsburgh and Pennsylvania. So I think there's almost like, in my mind, a wait-and-see attitude as we wait to see what is this deal that he's talking about. And for all the talk about partnership, and I know Jared said it, maybe it doesn't matter. I think it does matter to me in my brain. Is it an acquisition of full takeover or a partnership?
Well, we're dying to find out, Jeanne, and the president didn't only talk about this deal. Something else we're waiting for, of course, is his big, beautiful bill, which is now on its way to the Senate in Washington. Listen to the president from a few moments ago.
right now on the verge of passing the largest working class tax cuts in American history. We got to get that beautiful, big bill, beautiful, beautiful as it is. We got to get it passed. The Senate, call your senators. And I'll tell you, you have great people representing you. Your senators, your congressmen, you have great people. Every single Democrat House member voted to impose the largest tax hike in history. The Democrats are voting for the largest, highest tax hike in history. I've never heard of it before.
Call your senators, he said, Lisa. They're coming back to town next week, and they're actually going to start drilling down on this bill. Will Donald Trump also be calling senators to twist their arms?
I mean, I would imagine he did. He got involved in the House side, right? So he made a lot of calls, and he called people into the White House, and he did everything he could as a president to get it through the House. And I think he, too, will do the same with the Senate. I mean, this is the Senate. This is the first big negotiation, the first big move that the new majority leader, Mr. Senator Thune, will be overseeing. And so that'll be interesting to see. For people like us who watch Washington pretty closely, I think that we're all a little extra interested to see how the Senate and how this all unfolds. But there are a lot of factions that are unhappy with the way this bill has come together, have a lot of concerns about it. Certainly the president will be involved. And it was a big call to be and to ask people to advocate and to move in their own spaces, to pick up the phone and call their senators to get it done right there while he was talking about what he believes to be a good economic news day with the creation of jobs and money into the U.S. economy.
Well, and Jeanne, in our final moment left, you too will be watching what the Senate does next week. There's a number of issues. Do spending cuts go deeper? Do they roll back Medicaid cuts? Do they want some of those Inflation Reduction Act subsidies to actually stay? What will you be focused on?
You know, I think I'm going to be focused primarily on the issue of the debt and deficit. We've heard from Ron Johnson, Rand Paul, other senators who say they are deeply concerned about that. And also, in my back of my mind, while Lisa's talking, I'm thinking about poor Mike Johnson, who went over to the Senate the other day and said getting this deal was like walking across the Grand Canyon on, I think it was dental floss.
I think he did say that, yes.
Disrupt it, and you know they're going to disrupt it, right, Caitlin?
Well, we have so much to look forward to next week. Jeanne, Zaino, and Lisa Camooso Miller, our political panel on this extended edition of Balance of Power this evening. Thank you so much. And of course, extending, as we heard from President Trump in West Mifflin, Pennsylvania, more on the U.S. Steel Nippon deal. Yes, Joe, but also the announcement of a doubling of tariffs on steel and aluminum from 25% to 50%.
He kind of buried his own lead there. We had to get quite a bit into the speech before we got that far. On any other day, that would be a massive story. It is, of course, and that's why it was a redhead on the terminal. How this resolves is going to be interesting as we still wait to get details on this deal. Kaylee and the president will be knee-deep in the throes of debate around one big, beautiful bill next week. So things stay awfully busy, and we're going to pick up right where we left off on Monday.
Indeed, we will. That is when the Senate returns to session after the Memorial Day recess, so we'll have full coverage of that. You can also find coverage of all of these stories we're following, as always, in the Washington Edition newsletter, on the terminal, and online. Thank you for joining us live from global headquarters in New York this evening. We'll be back in Washington on Monday. Enjoy the weekend. This is Bloomberg TV and Radio.